Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video we're going to be checking out some incredible battles in the Open Master League featuring my Legacy Hyper Beam Shadow MEWTWO. Hyper Beam is an incredibly powerful charge move. MEWTWO has one of the highest possible attack stats in the game, and that damage is only increased by the fact that it's a shadow. While I definitely do not recommend using an Elite TM on Hyper Beam, the battles you're about to see are incredibly fun. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches and check out Legacy Hyper Beam Shadow MEWTWO in action in the Master League. Hopping to the first match, picking up a great lead, Dialga into Giratina Origin. Opponent is actually staying in this match, which works out quite nicely for me, because my backline really does not want to see Giratina. They're going to be firing off a charge move, going straight for the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball lands, and they're going to save switch into their own Dialga. I'm going to stay in and fire off an Iron Head bait, hoping to try and grab a shield, which I do, and now I can bring in Zacian. Thanks to that little bit of Dragon Breath damage, this Dialga is now in close combat range, so I'm in a very comfortable spot here. I am going to shield up the Iron Head and then massively overfarm with my Zacian, almost to the back-to-back close combats. I'm going to be firing off the first charge move here. Close combat, gets the shield. Dialga continues to farm, but Zacian reaches close combat number 2. No shields remaining. This will KO, and now I have switch advantage and shield advantage. The opponent is going to have to fire off a charge move here. I'm double debuffed, so this Ominous Wind is going to KO, but I have alignment, and I have switch. I'm going to bring in Dialga in the back. They have Zacian, and there is nothing stopping MEWTWO from going for the Hyper Beam. They are going to be able to reach a play rough. I do survive it. I'm going to let that go. MEWTWO farming up, going for the Hyper Beam. Shields down. Shadow MEWTWO one-shots the Zacian. Back in comes Giratina, but we have the Iron Head loaded on Dialga. Dialga taking out the Giratina, and that is a good game. Leading into a mirror match in the next game, Dialga into Dialga. I will stay in this matchup to start until we both throw a charge move, and then I will eventually save switch into Zacian. The goal of the Zacian save switch is going to be to try and force shields, so that way, shields down, Shadow MEWTWO is able to Hyper Beam. I'm able to successfully call the Iron Head bait, and I'm going to bait back. My Iron Head gets no shielded as well. I'm going to save switch into Zacian. Dialga is going to stay in here. They will reach an Iron Head, but I've gotten them to the point where basically any of my Pokemon should be able to farm them down. They're going to bring in their own MEWTWO, and I have a big energy lead on my Zacian. I'm going for the Play Rough right off the bat. Play Rough is able to land. I continue to farm. I'm still not in a range where a Psy Strike is going to KO, so I don't have to shield this. Psy Strike, not going to be taking me out. I'm going to overfarm and then go for the close combat. Close combat is resisted, but it will be enough to knock out, and they're going to let it through. In the back, they have Groudon, and that is a bit scary with 2 shields. I'm going to fire off the close combat, hopefully grab the first shield, and then bring in Shadow MEWTWO. Shadow MEWTWO, farming up, going straight for the Psy Strike. Shadow Psy Strike will not KO, but it will do a ton of damage as my opponent commits the shield. They do have enough for the Earthquake here. I decide to respect it. Opponent full sends the Earthquake, and that's a massive shield. I continue to farm. They go for the catch, and now it is time. MEWTWO farms down the Dialga. Hyper Beam one-shots the Groudon, and that is a good game. Same leads in the next match, leading into another Dialga mirror. Last time, I baited and my opponent called my bait, so this time I'm going to play it slightly differently. I'm just going to go straight for the Draco and hope my opponent decides to no-shield. My opponent goes for the extra. I'm going straight for the Draco Meteor. Draco Meteor does get shielded, and I save switch into Zacian. They will be able to get that shield back with an Iron Head, as I don't want to take that damage. So I commit the shield. Opponent is going to respond with a MEWTWO of their own. One Psy Strike, as we know, doesn't KO, and I'm perfectly fine with playing this out. Playing out the 0 shields here, I should be able to get them low enough where I can farm down with Dialga and get an energy lead over my opponent. Play Rough is going to get them quite low. My opponent does not overfarm whatsoever, and that's perfect for me, because this should be perfect farm down range for Dialga. In comes Dialga. Dialga gets the farm down, and I still have a nice amount of HP as well. My opponent probably going to be sending back in their own Dialga. That's exactly what they're going to do. I go for the Iron Head, making them make a difficult decision here. Are they willing to give up the final shield? They are not. In the back, they have Kyogre, and it's Kyogre versus Shadow MEWTWO. One Psy Strike is not going to be enough to one-shot here. The question is, do I bait or do I full send the Hyper Beam? I am going straight for it. Shadow MEWTWO, Hyper Beam. takes out Kyogre, and secures the win. Hopping into the next match, leading Dialga into Dragonite. Pretty nice lead for Dialga, but I do have to be mindful of a potential superpower. So I'm going to stay in this matchup to start and look to try and catch a superpower. So I farm up, switch into Zacian, but my opponent holds onto their energy, and they're going to send in their Mewtwo. Ideally, I'm not going to win this matchup, but I'm hopefully going to be able to get shields down and get this Mewtwo into a spot where I can farm it down with Dialga. They're going to fire off their first Ice Strike. I'm going to let that through, but their second one, I am going to start shielding here because if possible, I do need to take care of these shields to free up Mewtwo to close in the end game. I'm going to overfarm, fire off the close combat. It will be enough to KO from this range. My opponent is not going to shield in the back. They have their own Zacian, and that is a bit scary for me. I'm going to fire off the Play Rough. Play Rough does get shielded. They have to throw a charge move here. They're not going to be able to farm me down before I reach a move, and they're forced to fire off some energy. Zacian goes for the close combat, so they are now debuffed. I'm going to send in Dialga, and I'm able to reach the Iron Head. This should be grabbing that final shield, and with shields down, Shadow Mewtwo is primed to sweep. They're going to fire off their close combat. I'm going to let that through. I'm putting all my faith into my Hyper Beam Shadow Mewtwo. Mewtwo continues to farm. Zacian does have quite a bit of energy here. I will commit the shield on the Play Rough, and then I'm going to massively overfarm in this matchup and fire off the Side Strike right as they reach their charge move. This Side Strike will easily KO. I know their Dragonite has some energy. Side Strike would KO, but I did not TM on Hyper Beam to throw a Side Strike. Hyper Beam is going to be massive overkill, taking out the Dragonite, and that is a good game. Picking up a tough lead in the next match, Dialga into Genesect. Honestly, my entire team struggles against Genesect, so this is definitely an uncomfortable Pokemon to see. They do already have enough for the Techno Blast, and they go straight for it, as that does a lot of damage. I'm going to farm up to the Draco Meteor and bait with the Iron Head. I'm expecting this is going to draw a shield. Genesect, not the tankiest Pokemon ever. They're going to continue to farm, and they're going to fire off a charge move. At this point, I am just going to let my Dialga go and bring in Zacian. In comes Zacian. I'm going to farm up, get ahead on energy here. They're going to bank a bunch of energy and then pivot into their Giratina Altered. I'm very happy to see the Giratina here because I have a massive energy lead on my Zacian, and two Play Roughs are going to be lethal. I'm not going to shield here. It's unlikely that they're running Shadow Force. It is just a Shadow Sneak. I'm going to farm up and go for another Play Rough. This Play Rough will be lethal if they let it through. My opponent is going to commit the final shield. You absolutely love to see it. And now I have two shield Shadow Mewtwo versus the world. They go for the Shadow Sneak. I believe they're short here, so I decide to let this go. It is just a Dragon Claw, and I'm barely able to survive and reach the last second Play Rough. I don't want to get farmed down by the Genesect, so I will immediately switch into Mewtwo. This is a tough matchup. I'm hoping that they're running Magnet Bomb instead of X-Scissor, but as you're going to see, they're running X-Scissor. That is not great. They're going to be able to force both of my shields here, as X-Scissor would do a lot of damage to a Shadow Mewtwo. We'll have to see what they have in the back, and it's Dragonite. I'm going to farm up and fire off the Hyper Beam on CMP. Hyper Beam is going to one-shot the Dragonite. I have to hope I can outpace the Genesect. In comes the Genesect. We get outpaced by a turn, and we lose a heartbreaking game. Hopping into the next match, leading into yet another Dialga mirror. Last time, I went for the nuke, and it was shielded, so this time, I'm going to go for the bait. It's definitely staying in this matchup, so that way, I can get their Dialga low. I build up to the move, but I lose the coin flip CMP. I'm going to call the bait. Opponent full sends the Draco Meteor, and I get taken out. I bring in Zacian, and my opponent pivots into an Excadrill. And honestly, this is really nice for me. I'm going to be able to tank one move, no problem, because I haven't lowered my defense yet. I'm going to farm up and then fire off the close combat. This will easily KO the Exca. Decision time for my opponent, and they actually commit a shield. That works out very nicely for me, as I can again overfarm with Zacian, fire off another close combat, and if they're willing to give me that final shield, then I have shields down Shadow Mewtwo. I'm going for close combat number 2. My opponent is going to let that go, and they're probably going to wait their timer and then bring in their third Pokemon, as they don't really want to bring in Dialga here. They bring in Therian Landorus. Therian Landorus is going to bank some energy and then send in Dialga. I'm going to overfarm as much as I can and then fire off the Side Strike. This will be lethal, and then back in comes the Landorus. I'm farming up, and I get to the Hyper Beam. They have to shield this or they get taken out. Hyper Beam does get shielded on the CMP tie. I'm just going to let this go, trusting in Zacian. My opponent goes for a superpower, but it doesn't KO. They get some extra farm, but they are now debuffed, which means this play rough should safely KO. I will commit the shield. They go for the Stone Edge. We lose CMP, but we're going to be able to win the game. Play rough will be taking care of the Landorus as we're able to grab the win. Hopping into the next match, leading into, you guessed it, yet another Dialga mirror. As always, gonna stay in and try and play it out. Little bit of weak connection there at the start, which is unfortunate. I'm gonna continue to farm. My opponent is gonna fire off a charge move. I decide to call the bait. My opponent goes for the Iron Head, and I'm gonna return fire with the Draco Meteor to try and punish a no shield. Going straight for the Draco. Draco lands, and I'm able to take out my opponent. I probably need to switch here. Since I'm debuffed, they bring in a Giratina, and I'm going to respond with my Zacian. I do have quick attack, which does make this matchup worse for me, but the fact that my opponent is staying in is really good news. They go for the Ancient Power, and I have to really hope that they do not get the boost. I fire off the Play Rough. First one is able to land, and a second one will definitely be fatal. My opponent is going to fire off another Ancient Power. I do live this one, so I am going to let that go, and I should live a third one as well. So I'm going to farm up, and then go for the Play Rough. Really hoping my opponent decides to let this through. My opponent is going to commit the shield, though. They are committing to this Giratina, which is a little unfortunate. After the Shadow Claws, I think this Ancient Power might kill, and it barely does not, but they're able to farm down. I'm going to bring in my Dialga, farm up. They bank a move in the back. They have their own Mewtwo, and it's a Mewtwo versus Mewtwo battle. They do have a shield, whereas I have two. I'm going to shield up the Psystrike and continue to farm. I'm going to farm up a ton of energy and then bait with my Psystrike. Psystrike gets the shield. That is big. I'm going to farm, and I need to make it to the Hyper Beam. A Psystrike is not going to KO here. My opponent goes for the Psystrike. I go for the Hyper Beam, but I lose CMP. That is not good. This Psystrike not going to be enough to KO, but it is going to do quite a lot of damage. I'm going for the Hyper Beam here. Hyper Beam takes down my opponent. In comes Giratina. I have to hope they're not at the back-to-back moves here. They fire off a move. In comes Dialga. They're at the back-to-back moves. And unfortunately, we lose a heartbreakingly close game. Hopping into the final match, leading Dialga into Giratina. Very nice lead for me. My opponent is going to immediately save switch into their own Zacian. I'm going to stay in this matchup to start and go for the Iron Head. This way I can deal a massive amount of damage or grab a shield. Iron Head is going to land. I farm up, try and go for the catch, but my opponent holds onto their energy, and now they're going to be able to reach double play rough versus my Zacian. I'm going to tank one, shield one, and then go for the farm down. I will be down a shield, but at the very least this way I will leave with quite a lot of energy to threaten their Giratina. I do get the farm down, which is quite nice. They're more than likely going to be sending back in that Giratina, and Giratina is going to pay a heavy price because I already have over a play rough loaded. Firing off the first move, opponent is going to shield it. Let's see, are they willing to commit the final shield here as I'm able to reach play rough number 2. Decision time for the opponent. They are going to let that go, trusting that they will survive it, and they get a farm down to leave with a ton of energy. I bring in my Dialga. They have a lot of energy, and they're going to start firing it off now. They go for the Shadow Ball. That does a lot of damage. I farm up. In the back, they have Excadrill, and I'm going to respond with Shadow Mewtwo. I believe in this moment, my only win con is to actually lose this matchup, and then farm down the Exca with Dialga so I can win CMP over the Giratina. I'm going to fire off the Psystrike. Psystrike gets the shield. I should be able to reach a Hyper Beam in this matchup, but unfortunately, a Hyper Beam is not actually what I want to throw here. I'm going to farm up. As you can see, I could get to the Hyper Beam, but instead, I'm going to fire off the Psystrike on CMP. The Psystrike will not KO, and this will allow me to farm with my Dialga. This is going to take out the Mewtwo. Back in comes Dialga. Opponent tries to go for a move, but the Dragon Breath's register, taking out the Giratina, and we will get the win. Iron Head KOs the Excadrill, and that is a good game. All in all, this was probably the most fun I have ever had in the Open Master League. Hyper Beam on Shadow Mewtwo, definitely not a moveset I would recommend in terms of practicality, but in terms of fun, getting to one-shot all of those Pokemon was an incredible amount of fun. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you, as always, to our members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is absolutely incredible. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.